Chapter 44. Stanley tried to sleep, not knowing when he'd get the chance again. He heard the showers and later the sound of dinner. He heard the creaking of the rec room door. His fingers drummed against the side of the hole. He heard his own heartbeat. He took a drink from the canteen. He had given Zero the water jars. They each had a good supply of onions. He wasn't sure how long he remained in the hole. Maybe 5 hours. He was surprised when he heard Zero whispering to wake him up. He didn't think he'd fallen asleep. If he had, he thought it must have been for the last 5 minutes. Although, when he opened his eyes, he was surprised how dark it was. There was only one light on camp, in the office. The sky was cloudy, so there was very little starlight. Stanley could see a sliver of a moon, which appeared and disappeared among the clouds. He carefully led Zero to the hole, which was hard to find in the darkness. He stumped over a small pile of dirt. "I think this is it," he whispered. "You think?" Zero asked. "It is." "It's it," said Stanley. His surroundings more certain than he was. He climbed down. Zero handed him the shovel. Stanley stuck the shovel into the dirt at the bottom of the hole and stepped back on the blade. He felt it sink beneath his weight. He scooped out some dirt and tossed it over to the side. Then he brought the shovel down. Zero watched him for a while. "I'm gonna try and go to refill the water jars," he said. Stanley took a deep breath and exhaled. "Be careful," he said, then continued digging. It was so dark, he couldn't even see the end of his shovel. For all he knew, he would be digging up gold and diamonds instead of dirt. He brought each shovelful close to his face, tried to see anything if there was there before dumping it out of the hole. As he made the hole deeper, it became harder to lift the dirt up and out. It was 5 feet deep before he even started. He decided to use his effort to make it wider instead. This made more sense, he told himself. If Kate Barrow had buried the treasure chest, she wouldn't have been able to dig much deeper, or why should he? Of course Kate Barrow would have a whole gang of thieves helping her. "You want some breakfast?" Stanley jumped at the sound of Zero's voice. He hadn't heard him approach. Zero handed in a box of cereal. Stanley carefully poured some cereal into his mouth. He didn't want to put any dirty hands inside the box. He nearly gagged on the ultra-sweet taste. They were frozen frosted flakes. After eating nothing but onions for more than a week, he had trouble adjusting to the flavor. He washed them down with a swig of water. Zero took over the digging. Stanley shifted fingers to the fresh piles of dirt in case he had missed anything. He wished he had a flashlight. A diamond no bigger than a pebble would be worth $1,000. There'd be no way he'd see it. They finished the water that Zero had gotten from the big pot got by the showers. Stanley said he'd go fill the jars again, but Zero insisted that he do it instead. "But you make no offense, but you make too noise when you walk. You're too big." Stanley returned to the hole. As the hole grew wider, the parts of the surface kept caving in. They were running out of room to make it much wider. They would first have to move some of the surrounding dirt piles out of the way. He wondered how much time they had before the camp woke up. "How's it going?" Zero asked when he returned with water. Stanley shrugged one shoulder. He brought the shovels out down the side of the hole, shaving off a slice of the dirt wall. As he did so, he felt the shovel bounce off something hard. "What was that?" Zero asked. Stanley didn't know. He moved the shovel up and down the side of the hole. As the dirt chipped and flaked away, the hard object became more pronounced. It was sticking out of the side of the hole, about 1.5 feet at the bottom. He felt it with his hands. "What is it?" Zero asked. He could just feel a corner of it. Most of it was still buried. It had the cool, smooth texture of metal. "I think I might have found the treasure chest," he said. His voice was filled with astonishment, then with excitement. "Really?" asked Zero. I think so, Stanley said. The hole was wide enough for him to hold the shovel lengthwise and dig sideways into the wall. He knew he had to dig very carefully. He didn't want the side of the hole to collapse along with the huge pile of dirt directly above it. He scraped at the dirt wall until he exposed one entire side of the box-like object. He ran his fingers over it. It felt about 8 inches tall and over 2 feet wide. He had no way of knowing how far into the earth it extended. He tried pulling it out, but it wouldn't budge. He was afraid that the only way to get it was to start back up at the surface and dig down. They didn't have much time for that. I'm gonna try and dig a hole underneath it, he said. Maybe then I can pull it down and slip it out. Go for it, said Zero. Stanley jammed the shovel into the bottom edge of his hole and carefully began to dig a tunnel underneath the metal object. He hoped it didn't cave in. Occasionally he stopped, scooped down, and tried to feel the far end of the box, but even when the tunnel was as long as his arm, he couldn't feel the other side. Once again, he tried pulling it out, but it was firmly in the ground. He pulled too hard, he feared, he'd cause a cave-in. He knew that when he was ready to pull it out, he wouldn't have to do it quickly before the ground above it collapsed. As his tunnel grew deeper and wider and more precarious, Stanley was able to feel latches on one end of the box, then a leather handle. It wasn't really a box. I think it might be some kind of metal suitcase, he told Zero. Can you pry it loose with the shovel? Zero suggested. I'm afraid the side of the hole will collapse. Well, you might as well give it a try, said Zero. Stanley took a sip of water. Might as well, he said. He forced the tip of the shovel between the dirt and the top of the metal case and tried to wedge it free. He wished he could see what he was doing. He worked the end of the shovel back and forth, up and down, until he felt the suitcase swallow free. He felt the dirt coming down, piling down on top of it. It wasn't a huge cave-in. As he knelt down in the hole, he could only tell there was only a small portion of earth that had collapsed. He dug with his hand until he found the leather handle and pulled out the suitcase out of the dirt. I got it, he exclaimed. It was heavy. He handed it to Zero. You did it, Zero said, taking it from him. We did it. He gathered his remaining strength and tried to pull himself to the surface. Suddenly, a bright light was shining in his face. Thank you, said the warden. You boys have been a big help. Chapter 45. The beam of flashlight was directed away from Stanley's eyes and onto Zero's, who was sitting on his knees. The suitcase was on his lap. Mr. Pendeski was holding the flashlight. Mr. Sir was next to him with his gun drawn and pointing into the same direction. Mr. Sir was barefoot and bare-chested, only wearing his pajama bottoms. The warden moved toward Zero. She was also in her bedclothes with an extra long t-shirt. Unlike Mr. Sir, however, she had her boots on. Mr. Pendeski was the only one fully dressed. Perhaps he had been on guard duty. Off in the distance, Stanley could see two more flashlights bobbing towards him in the darkness. He felt helpless in the hole. You boys just arrived in the nick, the warden started to say. She stopped talking when she stopped walking. She slowly backed away. A lizard had crawled up on top of the suitcase. Its big red eyes glowed in the beam of the flashlight. Its mouth was open, and Stanley could see its white tongue moving in and out of its black teeth. Zero sat as still as a statue. The second lizard crawled up over the suitcase and stopped less than an inch away from Zero's little finger. Stanley was afraid to look and afraid not to. He wondered if he should try and scramble out of the hole before the lizard turned on him, but he didn't want to cause any commotion. The second lizard crawled across Zero's fingers and halfway up his arm. It occurred to Stanley that the lizard was probably on the suitcase when he handed it to Zero. There's another one, gasped Mr. Pendeski. He shined a plaster on the box of frosted flakes, which lay on the side Stanley's hole. A lizard was crawling out of it. The light was also illuminated Stanley's hole. He glanced down and had to force himself to suppress a scream. He was standing in a lizard's nest. He felt the scream explode inside of him. He could see 6 lizards. 3 were on the ground, 2 were on his left leg, and 1 was on his right sneaker. He remained very still. Something was crawling up the back of his neck. 3 other counselors approached this area. Stanley heard one say, "What's going on?" and whisper, "Oh my God." "What do we do?" asked Mr. Pendeski. "We wait. It won't be very long." "At least we have a body to give that woman," said Mr. Pendeski. "She's going to ask a lot of questions, and this time she'll have the AG with her." "Let her ask questions," said the warden. "Just so long as I have the suitcase, I don't care what happens." "Do you know how long?" Her voice trailed off and suddenly up again. "When I was little, I watched my parents dig holes every weekend and holidays. When I got bigger, I had to dig too, even on Christmas." Stanley felt tiny claws dig into the side of his face as the lizard pulled itself off his neck and up past his chin. "Won't be long now," the warden said. Stanley could hear his heartbeat. Each beat told him he was still alive, at least for 1 more second. 500 seconds later, his steel was... Chapter 46. 500 seconds later, his heart was still beating. Mr. Pendeski screamed. The lizard, which had been in the cereal box, was springing towards him. Mr. Sir shot in mid-air. Stanley felt a blast shatter in the air around him. The lizard scurried frantically across his very still body. He did not flinch. A lizard ran across his closed mouth. He glanced at Zero's, and Zero's eyes met him. Somehow they were both still alive, at least for 1 more second. 1 more heartbeat. "Mr. Sir, little Sargent, I thought you quit," said one of the other counselors. "Well, sometimes sunflower seeds just won't cut it." He took a long drag on his syndicate. "I'm just going to have to nightmares the rest of my life." "Maybe we should just shoot them?" asked Mr. Pendeski. "Who?" asked the counselors. "The lizards or the kids?" Mr. Pendeski laughed grimly. "The kids are going to die anyway," he laughed. "At least we got plenty of graves to choose from. We still got time. I waited this long. I can wait another few." Her voice trailed off. Stanley felt a lizard crawl in and out of his pocket. "We're going to keep our story simple," said the warden. "The woman is going to ask a lot of questions. The AG will most likely innate an investigation. So this is what happened. Stanley tried to run away in the night, fell in a hole, and the lizards got him. That's it. We're not even going to tell them. I'm going to give them Zero's body. As far as anybody knows, Zero doesn't exist. Like Mom said, we still got plenty of grades to choose from." Why wouldn't he run away if he knew he was released today? Who knows? He's crazy. That's why he couldn't release him yesterday. He was delirious, and he had to watch over him so he wouldn't hurt himself or anybody else. "She's not gonna like it," said Mr. Pendeski. "She's not going to like anything we tell her," said the warden. She stared at Zero and the suitcase. "Why aren't you dead yet?" she asked. Stanley only half listened to the talk and the counselors. He didn't know who that woman was or what AG meant. He didn't even realize their initials. They sounded like one word, AG. His mind was focused on the tiny claws that moved up and down his skin through his hair. He tried to think about the other things. He didn't want to die with the images of the warden, Mr. Sir, and the lizard attached into his brain. Instead, he tried to see his mother's face. His brain took him back to a time when he was very little, all bundled up in a snowsuit. He and his mother were walking hand in hand, midden in midden. They both slipped on some ice and fell and rolled down the snow-covered hillside. They ended up at the bottom of the hill. He remembered he almost cried, but instead he laughed. His mother laughed too. He could feel the same light-headed feeling he felt then, dizzy from rolling down the hill. He had felt the sharp coldness of the snow against his ear. He could see flecks of snow on his mother's bright and cheery face. He could guess what when he died. "Hey, caveman, guess what?" said Mr. Sir. "You're innocent after all. I thought you'd like to know that. Your lawyer came to get you yesterday. Too bad you weren't here." The words meant nothing to Stanley, who was still in the snow. He and his mother climbed back up the hill and rolled down again, this time on purpose. Later, they had hot chocolate with melted marshmallows. "It's getting close to 4:30, said Mr. Pendeski. "They'll be waking up." The warden told the counselors to return to the tent. She told them to give the campers breakfast and to make sure they didn't talk to anyone. As long as they did as they were told, they wouldn't have to dig any more holes. If they talked, they would get severely punished. "How should we say they'll get punished?" one of the counselors asked. "Let them use their imagination," said the warden. Stanley watched the counselors return to the tent, leaving only the warden and Mr. Sir behind. He knew the warden didn't care whether the campers dug any more holes or not. She found what she was looking for. Glanced at Zero. A lizard would perch on his shoulder. Zero remained perfectly still, except for his right hand, who slowly formed into a fist. He raised his thumb, then giving up to Stanley the thumbs up sign. Stanley thought to what Mr. Sir had said to him earlier, the bits of conversation he'd overheard. He tried to make sense about it. Mr. Sir had said something about a liar. Stanley knew his parents wouldn't afford a liar. His legs were sore from remaining rigid for so long. Slowly lowered himself to lean to the side of the hole. The lizard didn't seem to mind. Chapter 47. The sun was up, and Stanley's heart was still beating. There was 8 lizards in the hole with him. One had exactly 11 yellow spots. The warden had dark circles under her eyes from lax sleep, and the line across her forehead and the shape seemed to exaggerate in the dark morning light. Her skin looked blotchy. "Satan?" said Zero. Stanley looked at him, unsure if Zero had spoken or he just imagined it. "Why don't you go see if you can take the suitcase from Zero?" the warden suggested. "Yeah, right," said Mr. Sir. "The lizards aren't hungry," said the warden. "Then you go get the suitcase," said Mr. Sir. They waited. "Stanley," said Zero. Sometime later, Stanley saw a tarantula crawl over the dirt, not too far from the hole. He had never seen a tarantula before, but there was no doubt that what it was. The moment fascinated, the big hairy movement. Slowly and steady moved along. "Look, a tarantula!" Mr. Sir, also fascinated. "I've never seen one," said the warden, except suddenly felt a sharp sting on the side of his neck. The lizard hadn't bitten him, however, it was merely pushing off. It leaped up Stanley's neck and pounced on the tarantula. The last Stanley was of it was one hairy leg sticking out of the lizard's mouth. "Not hungry, huh?" said Mr. Sir. Stanley tried to return to the snow, but it was harder to get up when the sun was up. And the sun rose. The lizards moved slower in the hole, keeping them mainly in the shade. They were no longer on his head, shoulders, but had moved down to the stomach, legs, and feet. He couldn't see any lizards on Zero, but believed there were 2 between Zero's knees, shaded from the sun by the suitcase. "How are you doing?" Stanley asked quietly. He didn't whisper, but his voice was dry and raspy. "My legs are numb," said Zero. "I'm going to try and climb out of the hole," Stanley said. As he tried to pull himself up, just using his arms, he felt a claw dig into his ankle, gently eased himself back down. "Is your last name your first name spelled backwards?" Zero asked. Stanley stared at him in amazement. He had been working on that all night. He heard the sound of approaching cars. Mr. Sir and Warden had heard it well. Do you think it's them? Asked the warden. Ain't Girl Scouts selling cookies, said Mr. Sir. He heard the cars come to a stop and the doors open and shut. A little while later, he saw Mr. Pendeski and two strangers coming across the lake. One was a tall man in a business suitcase and a cowboy hat, and the other was a short woman holding a briefcase. The woman had to take 3 steps, 2 taken by the man. Stanley Yelton? She called, moving out ahead of the others. I suggest you don't come any closer. You can't stop me, she snapped. Then took a second to glance at him, wearing pajama pants and nothing else. We'll get you out of here, Stanley, she said. Don't you worry. She appeared to be his panic, with their straight black hair and dark eyes. She spoke with a little of Mexican accent, thrilling her R's. What's a tarnation? The tall man exclaimed as he came up behind her. She turned on him. I'm telling you right now, if any harm comes to him, we're going to fill in charges only against Mr. Walker in Camp Green Lake and in entire state of Texas as well. Child abuse, false imprisonment, torture. The man was more than a head taller than she and was able to look directly over her as she spoke to the warden. How long have you been in there? All night, as you can see by the way we're dressed. They snuck into my cabinet while I was asleep, then stole my suitcase. I chased after them and they ran here and fell into the lizard's nest. I don't know what you're thinking. That's not true, Stanley said. Stanley, as your attorney, I advise not to say anything, said the woman, until you and I have the chance to talk in private. Stanley wondered why the warden lied about the suitcase. He wondered who it legally belonged to. That was one thing he wanted to ask his liar, if she really was his liar. It's a miracle they're still alive, said the tall man. Yes, it is, the warden agreed, with just a trace of disappointment in her voice. And they better come out of this alive, said Stanley's lawyer warned. This wouldn't have happened if you released to me yesterday. I wouldn't have one happen if he was a thief, said the warden. I told him he would be set free today, and I guess he decided to try and make some valuables with him. He was delirious for the last week. Didn't release him when she said to come to you yesterday? The tall man asked. She didn't have proper authorization, said the warden. I had a court order. It was not an authenticated, the warden said. Authenticated? It was signed by the judge who sentenced him. I need authentication from the Attorney General, said the warden. How do I know it's legitimate? The boys in the custody have proven themselves dangerous to society. Am I just supposed to turn them loose any time someone has to need a piece of paper? Yes, said the woman. If it's a court order. Stanley had been upstated for the last few days. The delirium, ranting and raving, he was in no condition to leave. The fact he was trying to steal from me on the day before his release proves. Stanley tried to climb out of his holes, using mostly his arms and not to disturb the lizard so much. As he pulled himself upwards, the lizard moved downwards, keeping out of the sun in direct rays. He swung his leg up and over, and the lizard hopped off. Thank God! Exclaimed the warden. She started towards him, then stopped. A lizard crawled out of his pocket and down his leg. Stanley, overcome by rush dizziness and almost fell over, steadied himself, then reached down. He took hold of Zero's arm and helped him slowly to his feet. Zero still held the suitcase. The lizard, who had been hiding under it, scurried quickly into the hole. Zero and Stanley staggered away. The warden rushed to them. She hugged Zero. Thank God you're alive, she said, and she turned to take a suitcase from him. He jerked it free. It belongs to Stanley, he said. Don't cause any more trouble, the warden warned. You stole it from a cabinet and you've been caught red-handed. If I press charges, Stanley might have returned to prison. Now, I'm willing in views all the circumstances to... It's got his name on it, said Zero. Stanley's lawyer pushed the tall man to have a look. See, said Zero. Stanley Yelton's. Stanley looked at two. There's in big letters that said Stanley Yelton's. The tall man looked over the heads and others at the name of the suitcase. You say he stole it from your cabinet? The warden stared at it in disbelief. That's impossible. She couldn't even say it. Chapter 48. They slowly walked back to camp. The tall man was Texas Attorney General and the chief law enforcement officer for the state. Stanley's lawyer was named Miss Marengo. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The authority camp general told Mr. Pendeski to get the boys something to eat and drink and eat. The warden seemed to daze at Stanley. You can't even read, she said to Zero. Zero said nothing. Miss Morgano put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He wouldn't be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow get the appearance of being tall. Mr. Pendeski returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice, but didn't feel like eating something. Wait, the warden had exclaimed. I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously. He put my things from the cabinet inside it. That isn't what you said earlier, said Miss Marengo. What's in the suitcase? The warden asked Stanley. Tell us what's in it. We'll open it and see. Stanley didn't know what to do. Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase, said Miss Marengo. He has to open it, said the warden. I have the right to check personal property from any of the detainees. How do I know these things are drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car, too. I got a witness. She was nearly hysterical. He is no longer under your registration, said Stanley's lawyer. He has not been officially released. Open the suitcase, Stanley. Do not open it, said Stanley's lawyer. Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Authority General handed Miss Marengo a sheet of paper. You're free to go, he said to Stanley. I know you're not anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir, or burn it, whatever you want to do. Good luck, Stanley. He reached out his hand to shake it, but Miss Marengo hurried Stanley away. Come on, Stanley, she said. We have a lot to talk about. Stanley stopped and looked back at Zero. He couldn't just leave him here. Zero gave him a thumbs up. I can't leave Hector, Stanley said. I suggest we go, said his lawyer with a sense of urgency in her voice. I'll be okay, said Zero. His eyes shifted toward Mr. Pendeski on one side of him, the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. There's nothing I can do for you as a friend. For your friend, said Mr. Marengo. You're a released person from an order from the judge. They'll kill him. Your friend is not in danger, said the Authority General. There's going to be an investigation into everything that happened here. For the present, I'm taking charge of camp. Come on, Stanley, said his lawyer. Your parents are waiting. Stanley stayed where he was, the lawyer sighed. May I have a look at Hector's files? She asked. Certainly, said the Attorney General. Miss Walker, go to Hector's files. She looked at him blankly. Well? The warden turned to Mr. Pendeski. Bring me Hector Zeroni's file. He stared at her. Get it, she ordered. Mr. Pendeski went into the office. He returned a few minutes later, announced that the file was apparently misplaced. The Authority General was outraged. What kind of camp are you running here, Miss Walker? The warden said nothing. She stared at the suitcase. The Authority General assured Stanley's lawyer that he'd get the records. Excuse me while I call my office. He turned back to the warden. I assume the phone works. He walked into the camp office, slamming the door behind him. A little while later, he reappeared and told the warden, he wanted to talk to her. She cursed, then went inside. Stanley gave Zeros a thumb up. Caveman, is that you? He turned to see Armpit and Squid coming out of the rec room. Squid shouted back into the rec room, Caveman and Zero are out there. Soon all the boys from Group D had gathered around him and Zero. Good to see you, man, Armpit said, shaking his hand. We thought you were preserved food. Stanley's is being released today, said Mr. Pendeski. Way to go, said Magna, hitting him on the shoulder. You didn't have to step on a rattlesnake, said Squid. Even Zigzag shook Stanley's hand. Sorry about you. You know. It's cool, said Stanley. We had to lift the truck clear out of the hole, Zigzag told him. It took everybody in C, D, and E. We just picked it right up. It was cool, said Twitch. X-Ray was the only one who didn't come over. Stanley saw him hang back in the others a moment, then realized it's in the rec room. Guess what, said Magna, glancing at Mr. Pendeski. Mom said we don't have to dig any more holes. That's great, Stanley said. Will you do me a favor? asked Squid. I guess, Stanley agreed, somewhat hesitatingly. I want you to, he turned to Miss Mangle. Hey, lady, can I have a pen and paper I can borrow? She gave it to him, and Squid wrote down a phone number which he gave to Stanley. Call my mom for me. Tell her I said I was sorry. Tell her Alan said he was sorry. Stanley promised he would. Now you be careful out in the real world, said Armpit. No, not everybody isn't nice as us. Stanley smiled. The boys departed when the warden came out of the office. The Authority General was right behind her. My office is having some difficulty locating Hector Zeroni's files, the Authority General said. So you have no claim of authority over him, said Mr. Moringo. I didn't say that. He's in the computer. We just can't access his records. It's like they've fallen through a hole in cyberspace. A hole in cyberspace, said Mr. Mango repeated. How interesting. When is his release date? I don't know. How long has he been here? Like I said, we can't. So what are you planning to do with him? Keep him indefinitely without justification? Just you go crawling through black holes in cyberspace? The Authority General stared at her. He was obviously care-centered for a reason. Oh, and the reason was the Authority General said nothing. Stanley's lawyer took hold of Zero's hand. Come on, Hector, you're coming with us. Chapter 49. There used to be a yellow-spotted lizard in the town of Green Lake. They didn't come into the area after the lake dried up. The town folks had heard about the red-eyed monsters living in the desert hills. One afternoon, Sam the Onion Man and his donkey, Mary Lou, was returning to the boat, which was anchored just a little offshore. It was late in November, and the peach trees had lost most of their leaves. Sam! Someone called. He turned around to see three men running after him, waving in their hats. He waited. Afternoon, Walter, Bo, Jesse. He greeted them as they walked up, catching their breaths. Glad we caught to you. We're going rattlesnake hunting in the morning. We want to get some of your lizard juice, said Walter. I ain't scared of no rattlesnakes, but I don't want to come across one of those red-eyed monsters. I seen one once, and that was enough. I knew about the red eye, of course. I hadn't heard about the big black teeth. It has white tongue that get me. Sam gave each man 2 bottles of pure onion juice. He told them to drink 1 bottle before going to bed that night, half a bottle in the morning, then half a bottle at lunchtime. You sure this stuff works? asked Walter. I'll tell you what, if it doesn't, you can come back to me next week and I'll give you your money back. Walter looked around unsure, and Bo and Jess laughed. Then Sam smiled. Even Mary Lou lets out a rare wee hee-haw. Just remember, Sam told the men before they left, It's very important you drink a bottle tonight. You got to get into your bloodstream. The lizards don't like onion blood. Stanley and Zero sat in the backseat of Mr. Moringo's BMW. The suitcase lay in between them. It was locked, and they decided to let Stanley's father try to open it in his workshop. You don't know what's in it, do you? She asked. No, said Stanley. I didn't think so. The air conditioner was on, but they drove in the windows open because, no offense, you boys smell bad. Miss Moringo explained that she was a patient authority. I'm helping your father with the new products he invented. It happened you happened to mention your situation, so I did a little investigating. Sal Livingston's shoes was sometime before 3:15. I found a young man, Derek Dune, who said that at 3:20 you were in the bathroom fishing your notebook out of the toilet. 2 girls remembered coming out of the boys' restroom carrying a red notebook. Stanley felt his ears reddened. Even everything he'd been through, his memory still caused him to feel shame. So you couldn't have stolen them, said Mr. Moringo. He didn't. I did, said Zero. You did what? Asked Miss Moringo. I stole the sneakers. The liar actually turned while driving and looked at him. I didn't hear that, she said, and advised you to make sure I don't hear it again. What did my father invent? Did he find a way to recycle sneakers? No, he's still working on that, explained Miss Moringo. He invented a product that eliminates foot odor. Here, I got a sample in my briefcase. I wish I had more. You two can bathe in it. She opened her briefcase and one hand passed a small bottle to Stanley and had a fresh, warm kind of spicy smell. He handed it to Zero. What's it called? You haven't come up with a name yet, said Miss Moringo. It sounds pretty familiar, said Zero. Peaches, right? Asked Miss Moringo. That's what everyone says. A short while later, both boys fell asleep. Behind them, the sky had turned dark. For the first time in over 100 years, a drop of rain fell into the empty lake. Part 3. Filling in the holes. Chapter 50. Stanley's mother insisted that there was never a curse. She even doubts whether Stanley's great-great-grandfather really stole a pig. The reader might have find it interesting, however, that Stanley's father's invention with his cure of foot odor the day after the great-grandson of Elia Yeltons carried the great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni up the mountain, and the Authority General closed Camp Green Lake. Miss Walker, who was in desperate need of money, had to sell the land which had been in her family for generations. It had brought by a national organization dedicated to the well-being of young girls. In a few years, Camp Green Lake will become Girl Scouts camp. It is pretty much the end of the story. Readers probably have some questions, but unfortunately, from here on in, the answers tend to be long and treacherous. While Miss Bell, Stanley's former math teacher, might want to know the percentage of Stanley's weight, the readers probably care more about the changes in Stanley's character and self-confidence. But those changes are suitable and hard to measure. There's no simple answer. Even the contents of Stanley's suitcase turned out to be some thought he and Hector had become millionaires, but the jewels were of poor quality, no worth than $20,000. Underneath the jewels was a sack of paper that once belonged to the first Stanley Yeltons. These consisted of stock certificates, deed of trust, and promissory notes. They They were hard to read and even more difficult to understand. Miss Moringo's law firm spent more than 2 months going through all the papers. They turned out to be a lot more valuable than jewels. After legal fees and taxes, Stanley and Zero each received less than $1 million. But not a lot yet less. It was enough for Stanley to buy his family a new house, laboratory in the basement, and Hector to hire a team of private investigators. It would be boring to go through their life with tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a half a year after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. You will have to fill your holes yourself. There's a small party at the Yelton's house, except for Stanley and Hector. Everyone there was an adult. All kinds of snacks and drinks sit out on the counter, including chambier and champagne, and the fillings to make ice cream sundaes. The Super Bowl was on television, but nobody was watching it. It seemed it should be coming on at the next break, said Miss Moringo announced. A time was called in the football game, and commercial came on the screen. Everyone stopped talking and watched. The commercial showed a vast baseball game. Amid a cloud dust, Charles Livingston slid into the home plate as the catcher caught the ball, tried to tag him out. Safe! Said the umpire as he signaled with his arms. The people at Stanley's house cheered as if the run really counted. Charles Livingston got up and dusted the dirt off his uniform. As he made the way back to the dugout, he spoke to the camera. Hi, I'm Charles Livingston, but everyone around him calls me Sweet Feet. Way to go, Sweet Feet, said another baseball player, slapping his hand beside his television screen. Charles Livingston was also sitting on the couch next to Stanley. But my feet were always sweet, the television Stanley Livingston. Charles Livingston was as he sat down on the dugout bench. They used to smell so bad, nobody would sit next to me in the dugout. They really did stink, said the woman sitting on the couch the other side of Charles. Her nose hung on one hand, fanned air with the other. Charles trusted her. Then a teammate told me about sploosh, said the television. Charles. He pulled out a can of sploosh from under the dugout bench and held it up for everyone to see. I just spray a little on each foot every morning, and now I really do have sweet feet. Plus, I love the tingle. Sploosh, said a voice. A treat for your feet, made from all natural ingredients, neutralizes odor-causing fungi and bacteria. Plus, you'll like the tingle. Everyone at the party clapped their hands. He wasn't lying, said the woman who sat next to Kyle. I couldn't even be in the same room with his socks. Other people at the party laughed. The woman continued, I'm not joking. It was so bad. You made a point, said Kyle, covering her mouth with his hand. He looked back at Stanley. You'll do me a favor, Stanley? Raising his and lowering his left shoulder. I'm gonna get more caviar, said Stanley. Keep your hand over my wife's mouth, spat Stanley order as he rose from the couch. Stanley looked uncertainly at his hand, and then Stanley Livingston's wife. He winked at him. He felt a little blush and turned away towards Hector, who was sitting on the floor in front of the overstuffed chair. A woman sitting in the chair behind Hector was absently fluffing his hair with her fingers. She wasn't very old, but her skin had a weathered look to it, almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary and it almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary if she hadn't seen too many things in her life that she didn't want to see, and when she smiled, her mouth seemed too big for her face. Very slowly, she half hummed a song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a baby girl. If only the moon speaks no reply, reflecting the sun and all that's gone by. Be strong in my weary roof, turn around boldly, fly high, my baby girl, my angel, my only. Bye-bye. This is the end of this book. Bye.